All right, go for it.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the heck in the world you are. It's that time again. It's Friday. It's 2 p.m. on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And you know, it's Rogue Money Radio. It's my main man who's working the airwaves in the background, CJ, the producer extraordinaire, working those flux capacitors and those dilithium crystals. And we have on board with us today none other than the professor himself, Ken the Shotgun Schortgen Jr., here to break down so many global events. It's going to be a treat. So sit down, strap on your seatbelts, and get ready. Check us out on RogueMoney.net. Ken writes there, and also check out Ken on his site, thedailyeconomist.com. That is thedailyeconomist.com. And if you've also subscribed to this site, this YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to Ken's channel as well, which is called The Daily Economist. Check him out on YouTube. Subscribe to him. He's going to give you daily updates as well. Between the both of us, you're going to get the entire geopolitical perspective, and all you need to know is the one-stop shop. I love it. With that being said, without further ado, Kenny, what's going on, buddy?
Yo, 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 Rogue Money. We're like the BRICS coalition
We are the BRICS coalition, man.
of the social media.
We really are. We are. I mean, who out there is like us? You know, it's the team we have is phenomenal. Our viewpoint is nobody gives a geopolitical perspective like we do. Literally nobody. I mean, we listen to so many guys that are out there trying to do what we do, and they get it wrong. You can count on one hand, Ken, one hand who does what we do. One hand.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people will focus on just one little thing. They'll focus on gold and silver. They'll focus on the economy. They'll focus on cryptocurrencies. They'll focus on this, but they really don't bring the geopolitical or the entire historical viewpoint into this, taking a look at one sector of the financial system, another, putting them together,
Yeah.
and looking at the fact that the whole world is moving east.
It is. Absolutely correct, man. I mean, there's a lot of things happening right now. Where do you want to begin? We got the North Korea situation. We got Hurricane Irma, which is going to probably even, break us financially in some regards. We have so many issues, even market stuff, things that are happening in the market. Gary Cohn could be kicked out. We have domestic issues, Middle East issues. It goes on and on and on. So, Ken, take your pick.
I think the most important thing was what occurred over the last week. And you know what? I'm beginning to wonder if a lot of what U.S. policy is suddenly doing, what Draghi ended up doing during his announcement, is all because of what the BRICS did last weekend and what China did.
Can you refresh the audience, anybody who has missed this most profound news, the most earth-shattering news ever?
I'm going to take the steps because I've written 3 different articles because 3 different pieces of important information have come out on this. What ended up happening is last Saturday morning, or Friday night, Saturday morning in China, a little innocuous over at the Nikkei Times, a little innocuous article came out from an official at the Shanghai International Energy Exchange. That's the source. They came out and said that they are now ready to implement a new oil contract. Now, let's talk about this first before we get into everything else. There's 2 primary oil contracts in the world. There's Brent,
right,
which is out of London, and there's West Texas Intermediate, which is run at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
Right.
Both of those are denominated in dollars.
Correct.
Okay, they're the key oil contracts for the petrodollar system.
Yep.
So China, by doing this, is their next step. Obviously, they went after the gold market with the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Now they are going after oil. And the importance of this is, I think, has been the run-up of all these little meetings that Saudi Arabia has been having with both Russia and China, i.e. the Saudi monarch is going to go to Moscow for the first time.
Yeah.
And by taking the primary signatory for the petrodollar agreement and bringing them on board, because guess what? Who is Saudi Arabia's biggest customer?
China.
China. So do you think if China wants to start implementing some demands on their oil, especially now that Saudi Arabia is insolvent and hemorrhaging cash, they're going to follow that in a New York minute.
Yep.
So we have the Shanghai energy exchange going to now create an oil contract that's going to be denominated in yuan. Well, this fits something because if you've looked at China over the past few years, they've been slowly wanting to internationalize the RMB. They've got London, which is selling RMB denominated bonds, but really since the beginning of this year, that's come to a slowdown. This is the next step, both in a combination to destroy the petrodollar completely and to internationalize the RMB. And to, as a little carrot to this, for those in the world who really aren't sure of the Chinese currency used as an oil currency, they're going to then allow customers to, if they decide, to convert their yuan-denominated oil contracts to gold.
Yeah.
Now, hold on a second. Gotta love the cough button. The second important thing is immediately after that was done, we had the BRICS conference. You know, the 2017 annual BRICS conference in Xiamen, China. Now, what's interesting is this conference for the BRICS comes shortly after India, a BRICS nation, and China had a little skirmish along their border.
Correct.
I get the feeling that really that was a whole bunch of nothing.
Oh, it totally is a bunch of nothing.
You know, it was the Western media trying to push and escalate something that really wasn't that big a deal.
Right.
So the other side of the coin is that Modi, I think, is seriously on his way out. Yeah. When his little gambit, his little globalist gambit to get rid of cash has failed immensely, and opposition leaders are salivating. They're ready to just
their GDP took a hit because of it, Ken.
Exactly. So with that being said, India has fallen behind in this, and so they're going to cede to China as well if they want to stay really relevant in this. Now, Putin at the BRICS conference said this. He delivered the clincher. Russia shares the BRICS countries' concerns over the unfairness of the global financial and economic architecture, which does not give due regard to the growing weight of the emerging economies. We are ready to work together with our partners to promote international financial regulation reforms and to overcome the excessive domination of the limited number of reserve currencies. That pretty much just says what Putin said is the BRICS as a whole are ready to destroy the dollar as a unipolar reserve currency.
Game changer.
What is the third leg of this triangle? So we've got the oil contract convertible gold. We have the BRICS who are ready to fully publicly go after the dollar as a singular reserve currency. Then the BRICS had a huge forum which they are going to create their own cryptocurrency, the BRICS cryptocurrency, and it's going to be tied to this oil contract from China. So you have now the new oil. Of course, what this means is that the new oil market, this oil contract, is going to be on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And it's going to be backed by gold, backed by the yuan, and it's going to be done in settlement using cryptocurrencies.
Bingo.
And it's not going to be a China-only thing. It's going to be a BRICS as a whole thing.
Yeah. And Wall Street is literally, they've taken a dump in their pants. Washington has literally keeled over because there's nothing they can do to interfere or stop this, Ken.
Oh, exactly, because they don't control the blockchain. And here's what came out of this is tied to the cryptocurrency. While the U.S. dollar remains the most popular global trading and reserve currency, this is rapidly changing. A BRICS-backed cryptocurrency may be both the proverbial dollar buster as well as, and here's the most important part of why you're going to see the world head towards east, as well as a sanctions buster.
Bingo.
Because China built the CIPS and Russia built their ESFS before, this was at the end of 2016, before the blockchain suddenly emerged as the new platform. Right. So you don't need With the blockchain, you don't need Swift, you don't need CIPS, you don't need ESFS.
You don't need anything.
You don't need anything.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, you can create your own individual partnerships or currency swaps, or you can do it in coalitions, or you can do it globally. It doesn't matter. You can do it one or many.
There you go.
So this is the one thing that they're doing is they're jumping out ahead of the game, not only as preparation for the destruction of the petrodollar, because that's all that's holding the U.S. dollar. And here's the other thing that people might understand, and why the real rogue nation in all this is the United States. Russia and China have been begging the U.S. for the last 2 to 3 years to join the AIIB, to join the Silk Road, to become partners, equal partners in this. And Washington's rejected it. So at that certain point, they're washing their hands of them.
Yep. And it's the only thing they can do, man. It's and you look at the squabbles, you look at the rhetoric, you look at the saber rattling, you look at what they're trying to do, the last minute nonsense. We're going to sell lethal weapons to Ukraine. We're going to start a war in North Korea. We're going to, all of a sudden Israel, what do? They fly planes over Lebanon and shoot a missile over into Deir el-Zor in Syria, which is the last holdout for ISIS in the entire country at this point, Ken. This is what they're relegated to doing. What a bunch of losers.
Well, exactly. And I think this is why, this move today by the EU courts to fine and put demands on the Eastern European, the ancillary EU nations, Poland, Hungary, etc. That is going to be the nail that drives them into the Eurasian Economic Union and over to China.
Yep.
You take out a lot of these ancillary countries that don't have an extraordinary amount of debt. They're not tied to the bond system that, say, the PIGS nations are with Germany and Deutsche Bank.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really much that the EU can do.
Right.
And so if you take a slice off, we're not just talking the Middle East and Eurasia and that. You're talking then Eastern Europe. And you slice off and you leave the United States, Canada, Europe as a small little isolated area, and they can trade all they want, but they don't produce anything.
Correct.
Here's something else. I don't know if you had heard or noticed, but there is now the formation of the BRICS Plus.
Explain to the audience, Ken, what BRICS Plus is, because I think a lot of people haven't heard about this.
Yeah, the BRICS is the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These are the original members of the coalition. Now, for instance, China and the BRICS have invited a number of other countries to become a part of the BRICS coalition, what they're calling the BRICS Plus.
Yep.
Well, I don't know top of my head all 5 of the nations, but 2 of them are Thailand and Mexico.
Boom!
Now, after what Trump has done to Mexico with their demands, wanting to, ending NAFTA, wanting to put up a border wall, and demanding that all the jobs that had moved over to Mexico come back to the United States, what do you think Mexico's going to do?
We're out of here.
Exactly.
Andale, Holmes.
So the BRICS are now going to get a foothold in North America.
Yep.
And what are the 2 biggest production industries, 2 biggest industries that Mexico has?
Silver is one of them.
And oil.
Oil.
Pemex. So they are going to be a part of, eventually they're going to probably, recognize that the world's moving east. They're going to be part of this oil contract, and they're going to be able to provide the silver as a monetary backing. So maybe they don't have gold-backed trade, but China and the BRICS will more than likely accept silver-backed trade.
Of course they, without a doubt. They'd absolutely do it in a heartbeat.
Now,
they're no longer, the most amazing thing about BRICS with China and Russia, this whole new multipolar world that's emerging, Ken, it is so refreshing to see that none of them are interested in paper derivatives when it comes to trade.
No, because the reason why. I think obviously the reason why is because if China were to absolutely destroy the United States and take over as the global reserve currency, they have said from day one they don't want to be the singular unipolar reserve currency, because they realize that if you are the singular reserve currency, you have to build your empire on debt.
Yep.
You have to continuously print new dollar or new yuan, new RMB over and over and over to supply and satisfy everybody else. Well, if you instead create a basket of currencies that are backed by gold that returns gold to the as the reserve currency standard, then countries don't have to really expand their monetary supplies to deal with the buying in that of oil. All they've got to do is ensure that they have the monetary base is in line with gold. And to be able to do this, of course, they're going to jack up the price of gold. You'll be able to do this. It's going to limit inflation, and you'll be able to have trade without having one trade partner being dominant to the other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
By the way, have you heard of a gentleman named Dr. Stephen Lieb?
No.
He's long-standing, 30-year. He's been he's sort of like Kyle Bass.
Okay.
He was a fund manager, really did well, and now he's pretty much become an analyst of that. He did a interview with King World News recently where he says, "We are now at the beginning of a new monetary world order that will be centered around gold." And he's throwing this out there. Within 1 year, all trade in the Eastern Hemisphere will most likely be gold backed.
I agree. I believe it 100%.
This is why the Silk Road countries, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Iran, Turkey, why they're all accumulating and now have an estimated accumulation of 34,000 tons of gold.
Amongst themselves or
amongst themselves?
That's tremendous.
Of which 20,000 is in China, and Russia, of course. Now that Sberbank is opening the gold trade to China, even more is going to go. So China is going to be the hub. Russia is going to be the energy hub, while China is going to be the financial hub, and all of these other countries that are on board, like Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkey, whatever, they're going to have the seat at the main table because they're being some of the first to jump on board.
But what about Goldman Sachs? Are they not invited?
Yeah. Well, we already know Goldman Sachs is seeing the writing on the wall when they come out and say, when Blankfein comes out and says, we need, isn't it interesting? I think this is a warning. This is a signal to the elites when you have the CEO of Deutsche Bank and you have Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, both in the same week say that the central bank QE has created bubbles and they need to cut the punch bowl. That's a signal. Okay, that's a purposeful signal that's telling everybody the jig is up.
Do you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, Ken? I think it was about 4 years ago, and that was when the new, at that time, the new head of the BOE, who is right now the current head of the BOE, came out and said, "Yeah, we've blown the biggest bubble in history."
Mark Carney?
Yep.
You mean the Mark Carney who went over to Canada when Canada was financially stable, built a housing bubble there, and just as the housing bubble was start to hit the top, he left and became the head of the Bank of England and created a housing bubble in England.
That's how he got the job. He's the master bubble maker. He's the master bubble blower. They said, "Hey, you know how to blow bubbles? Come on into the BOE. We'll take care of you."
I think that ought to be one of the rogues gallery for the Flash in the next season on TV. The Bubble Master. We already have Mirror Master. We need the Bubble Master.
The Bubble Master. What's his powers? He blows monetary bubbles within your economy so it all hyperinflates and pops. I love it. I love it. You know what I love, man? It's like this is happening. You get it. I get it. Our colleagues like Jim Willie gets it. London Paul gets it. We get it. Right? We get it. We have this thing down packed, sideways, backwards, and forwards. And yet we still hear the arguments. Well, China's trying to dominate the world. Ooh, this is a Rothschild scheme. This is the New World Order. It's just a different name. And I'm like, and I have to face palm myself, Ken. I have to face palm myself and say to myself, no, these people just don't get it. No matter how many times you lay it out in a very ardent and intellectual way, as clear as can be, they still miss it.
True. The thing about it is there will always be cabals.
Yep.
There will be. I mean, if you think about it, who were the bankers that rose during the Renaissance in Italy?
Most of them, Venetian bankers.
Yeah, the Venetian bankers, the Florence, etc. These were the rich and elite who survived with their wealth after the fall of the Roman Empire, and they survived through the Dark Ages, and they became the money masters coming out. Well, that cabal, of course, then got superseded by who? The Vatican.
Yep.
You know, the Roman Church was created in the latter days of the Roman Empire as a way to keep the Roman Empire going. And they carried all the wealth and all the control authority. Well, eventually the Vatican got superseded by the Rothschilds. Correct. But in the meantime, who's been around for 5,000 years as an empire?
China.
And so China has its own cabals, either the dynasties, or in this case, you have a lot of former criminal elements that have, and families that have become legitimate businessmen. If you think about it, a lot of the Chinese families, the White Dragons and all that, are the equivalent of the movie The Godfather, where the Sicilians first gained their wealth through criminal activity, and then at the very end, you got to the third movie, they were doing legitimate businesses.
Yeah, the Genoveses were like involved in politics and in banking and very.
Who do you think funds the Communist Party? You know, behind the scenes, this cabal in China, which is completely different than the European, the Vatican, the Western, etc.
Right.
They've been funding it for thousands of years. So the Communist Party has the political front, but they don't control the financial front. With that being said, throughout history, you can never get rid of these cabals. Okay, money, those in control money has always done it so that eventually the 1% own everything and the 99% own nothing. You have revolutions, and the revolutions really don't kill the wealthy and the cabalists. They kill the politicians who are the front men. You know, during the French Revolution, sure, Marie Antoinette and Louis the 14th or 15th, they got their heads taken off, but it didn't matter because those who were the power behind them still survived and thrived and took over.
Correct.
If you think about it, one of the interesting things is after the revolution, Robespierre, one of the reasons why he got his head cut off is because the Jacobins, who took over and created the Republic, they decided that they were going to take the printing press and hyperinflate the monetary system. And what was one of the first things that Napoleon did when he took over? He went back to a gold standard.
Correct.
And saved the economy.
Yep.
So there's too much historical benefit about gold and silver. And if you think about it from a biblical point of view, there's a reason why God said that the only real money is gold and silver. There's something not only natural about it in the economic sphere, but there's something metaphysical.
Yeah. I agree with that as well. There is something metaphysical. I mean, if you look at the dollar bills, I mean, guys like Joseph Farrell have talked about this very in detail. Bankster Slayer's talked about it. W's talked about it. I even think you, in some regards, have also spoken about this as well. The dollar bills, man, I mean, there's so much occultic, talisman-like symbols all over it. It's cursed in some regards on a spiritual sense. Whether, you want to believe in curses or not, it's clear that these guys who are printing this crap believe in a type of world and a type of power that you yourself don't believe in or don't seem to understand. But hey, man, that's what they believe in, and it's true, Ken, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All you have to do is take a look at what the purchasing power of any currency is once it became fiat. 1971. You can take a look at any graph. This is why the ignorance and intellectual dishonesty of the media, as well as the people at the bottom end. The problem has never been minimum wage. The problem has never been, the government getting involved with price controls, whatever. The problem has been the devaluation of the currency.
Correct.
Go back to 1960, before we went off the silver standard. The minimum wage was $1.20. And at $1.20, if you worked 40 hours a week, you made approximately $2,400–2,500 a year. You know what the income for the middle class was in 1960? Approximately $5,400. Just twice what you would have if the minimum wage, which means you could easily get rent. You could have a family. You couldn't have extraordinary things, but you could easily survive. Now take a look at the minimum wage at $7.25. $7.25 won't even, you'll spend 70% of your money paying rent.
Yep, exactly.
Why is it? And that's with the minimum wage 5 times more than what it was in 1960. Are you renting the same house, same type of apartment that you had in 1960? Pretty much.
Yeah.
The types of goods and services that we're getting are not much different.
Correct.
It's just the money itself is worthless. So the problem has always been to get rid of fiat currency, get rid of central banks, get rid of that, and go back to a gold standard. And if you take a look from the Currency Act of 1792 and move all the way forward, when money was backed by silver or gold, inflation was virtually zero.
Yeah, absolutely correct. It was,
and China is recognizing that, because the fact of the matter is that the dollar is not really the global reserve currency. Gold is not really the reserve currency. You know what is the global reserve currency?
Oil.
Oil is required for every single thing in the entire economy.
It really is. You want to make a toothpaste, you need oil. You want to make a toothbrush, you need oil. You want to make toothpicks, you need oil.
You want to grow food, you need oil.
You need oil.
Yeah.
You want to use toilet paper, you need oil.
You want to build a house.
Oil.
Yeah.
You want to build an eco-friendly piece of junk Tesla, you need oil.
Exactly. So that's the thing that China recognizes, is they're using gold because it's a recognized source for 5,000 years. But the fact of the matter is ever since oil was really discovered, in the 1860s, it superseded every energy source the world had ever known, and it became the currency. And this is interesting when you take a look at why this whole move towards global warming and carbon credits has come about. Because in the 1930s, I don't know if you heard the interviews on this, the technocrats. Mm-hmm. During the 1930s in the Great Depression, they're out of, I think, Princeton or Harvard, Brown, maybe one of the Ivy League schools. It
was Princeton.
Yeah, Princeton. There was the technocracy movement, and at its heyday, it had 500,000 members.
Yep.
And their goal was to have all money based on oil, energy.
Yeah. Energy.
And then, of course, in the 1970s, the technocratic society had gone by the wayside, but there was an individual who taught at Princeton who found all the old documents from the 1930s and decided that this is the way to go. Do you know who that individual is?
Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Exactly. And so that's why he was a part with Kissinger and all that of bringing about the petrodollar system in 1973. He used Jimmy Carter as the mechanism to try to get this thing going. He created the CFR and the Trilateral Commission was all based on the technocracy society. Mm-hmm. Well, if you have oil, petrodollar as your basis for your money supply for the entire world, what's the next step? Carbon credits is the final step, where the use of energy is how you're going to determine your money, not just energy itself. So that's what the whole thing behind this is the last ditch effort of the technocrats to try to control the monetary system. But Fact of the matter is they've gone by the wayside. They've died out. It just isn't working anymore. And so with the dollar pretty much devalued to the point of nobody accepting it, it's time to bring in the new system, and along comes the blockchain.
Yep. And, the whole thing, if it wasn't for the blockchain, man, you mentioned technocracy. I mean, one of the things about technocracy is you got two main guys. I forgot their exact names. It was, I think it was M. King Hubbard and, Scott something. Okay. Anyway, their whole thing is these were the guys who influenced Brzezinski. When Brzezinski came into New York, Brzezinski stayed at this guy's apartment. And it was Hubbard and Scott that taught Brzezinski technocracy and helped him get the funding to create the and influence Rockefeller, and they got the Trilateral Commission up and running. The original preface, the blueprint for control with technocracy was this. It was to have people registered on a continuous 24-hour per day basis, the total net conversion of energy. And by means of registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible always a balanced load. They're always seeking this balanced load. They're like obsessed with it, right? Too much population, too little population. They want to control everything, these control freaks. Provide continuous inventory of all production and consumption. Provide specific registration of the type, kind, etc. of all goods and services where produced and were used. And provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. So you want to talk about like a total control freak nightmare. Hubbard and Scott were detailing it, and this is the kind of stuff this is the cornerstone on which the entire New World Order is built, man.
Yeah, it's no different than what Cloward Pivens wrote,
Bingo.
Which then was followed in its finality through Obama to destroy the capitalist system by having the welfare state pretty much, destroy it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly correct. Overload the system and then let the whole system collapse on from its own weight.
Yep. So anyway, there's one thing I had sent you. If you check your email, I can start talking about it while you go find it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I did this on my podcast, and I wrote this article back in August 6th. But there's an interesting thing. I've always been questioning this when it comes to Bitcoin. Now, separate the blockchain. I am 100% for the blockchain. I have questions regarding cryptocurrencies and their specific facility in the financial system. I still have questions on that. As a speculative investment, you know what? I hope everybody has made millions on it. I'm not denying or trying to dissuade anybody from buying it.
Correct.
It's just an understanding of what it truly is or truly what it could be.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I found when I was doing my research in this article is that in 1996, 3 members of the NSA, that's right, the NSA, published a white paper titled How to Make a Mint, the Cryptography of Anonymous Electronic Cash. And in this white paper, analysts and researchers laid out the entire breadth and scope of replacing cash and other fiat currencies with a completely digital one based on anonymous cryptocurrency.
That's pretty interesting the way you brought that up. You know why? They brought this up in 96, right?
Right.
What happened in the late 80s to the early 90s? There was a big movement, and they were already talking about anonymous payment systems. One of which was, I think, was called ePay, was the early adopter. It was almost like an anonymous credit card. The problem why it failed and didn't get traction was because the guy who invented it was all of a sudden mired down in corporate banking and whatnot. They got involved.
Remember right, eGold was another one.
Yeah, eGold was another one, which happened late in the 90s. But the cypherpunk movement. That's it was late 80s, early 90s. They were already talking about this stuff. But go ahead, man. It's interesting that the NSA came forward with this.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I took the NSA document and I went out to a site and I did a word cloud search. For those who don't know, what you can do is you can take a document, put it in these algorithms, and they generate the top keywords from the document. By the way, the number 8 biggest or word that was used the most was the word coin. And within the top 300 words in this word cloud was the word bit.
Interesting.
So you have both bit and coin in the top 300 words of the word cloud of this 1996 NSA document. Now, the other thing I wanted to take a look at is the fact that who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
No one knows. It could be a group for all we know.
Could be a group, could be a government agency, could be whatever. But here's the kicker. Do you remember what month and what year the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper was published?
No, I don't remember what date.
It was published in October of 2008. The same month as the 2008 financial crisis. Coincidence?
No. And then Bitcoin was launched right after the Lehman Brothers went belly up.
In 2009, yeah. That's when Bitcoin really was done. Now, here's the other thing. Do you remember what was big, and there was a huge thing, government crackdown on it? Von Nothaus and the Liberty Dollar.
Yeah, the Liberty Dollar. Yeah, it was like it was a silverback, wasn't it, or gold?
It was a gold. It was a silverback dollar, and where, of course, the government got after him was the use of the term dollar. Even though dollar is a generic term.
Correct.
You know, it's used in currencies in different countries around the world anyway. We also have what happened in 2014. Who resigned from JP Morgan?
Who resigned?
Blythe Masters.
That's right. She went with the...
And she went on to create a new startup for blockchain technology. And this was in 2014.
Right. I remember that. She started that with Larry Summers.
Larry Summers, yeah. Was that also coincidence? As in the cryptocurrency that came out in late 2016, early 2017, when everything started exploding on the blockchain, the Federal Reserve settlement coin was created.
Interesting.
So you have all these things occurring in the same aspect. You have this anonymous cryptocurrency, which was then followed by, at the time, 548 other from Dogecoin, which had the picture of a Shiba Inu on it, to whatever. But in the meantime, you have Blythe Masters, who was the queen of the collateralized debt obligation.
Yep, the queen of derivatives.
Quit and become blockchain technology. Now, do you think she really quit on her own, or is she part of JP Morgan saying, hey, we'll use you as a temporary scapegoat for this, but we're going to fund you to start this new company to start working on blockchain technology?
Yeah. JP.
So we have all these things that are, the first concept of cryptocurrency was from the NSA. We have an anonymous individual who throws out a white paper in the very same month as a financial crisis. We have the creation of a cryptocurrency that I remember in 2010, because I had some friends who were part of the anarcho-capitalist movement, and up there at Pork Fest in New Hampshire and the Free State movement and all that, even before Berwick got big.
Yeah.
They were using cryptocurrency. It was a fringe thing. They were using Bitcoin, trading it around. As you've heard, the people didn't even know what Bitcoin was. There was this big joke about this one guy who got 2 or 3 people to give him 10,000 Bitcoin, and he ordered pizzas and paid for pizzas with a credit card. So he accumulated 10,000 Bitcoin for the cost of 3 pizzas. They didn't even know what the cost was at the time, the value.
Right.
But here's the thing: in 2017, where is the main source of trading of Bitcoin? Is it in the United States?
It's China.
No. Is it in Europe?
Nope.
No. 70% of all trading of cryptocurrencies is in South Korea, Japan, or China.
Yep, it's in Asia.
Now, what's the significance about those 3 countries? Their currencies are in trouble. their economies are in trouble, and they've implemented capital controls to try to keep their currencies within, especially as foreigners were moving money out hand over fist to build up the housing bubbles in Canada and Seattle and a few other places. 70% of all transactions. Now, this is why when China does their restrictions on ICOs, and then just today, they're going to shut down all their local Bitcoin exchanges. I don't know if you saw that news.
Yeah, they're shutting down the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency exchanges, except for at least about 43, which are licensed through them, in order
right.
to protect
all the local ones that were private.
Yeah.
So China is going to control it's virtually, when you license something like this, it's a capital control. It's a form of capital control. They want to know where the Bitcoin's going. They want to know the money coming in, who the users are, etc. And since, like I said, 70% of all transactions are being done by that. And also, I don't know if you may have seen the article I wrote. Got this from BitcoinPrivacy.net. With the blockchain, you can go out and see the raw data, right?
Yeah, you can.
You don't necessarily see the users, but you can see the raw data. Even in Bitcoin, 99% of all the Bitcoin is owned by 1% of the wallets.
Yeah.
78.8 million Bitcoin wallets out there on the blockchain. Those 78.8 million Bitcoin wallets own 232,958 total Bitcoin. Okay. But 684,338 Bitcoin wallets, which is about 1%, own 6,360,458 total Bitcoin. Now, if 1% owns the majority of an asset, do you think that they can manipulate the price at any time they want?
Oh yeah, they could definitely.
They could dump it.
Yep.
They could, since they own it, they could keep it from being sold out there. And all that's being sold, or what they can do is they can hold their Bitcoin and allow these little tiny transactions to take place, which of course drives up the price. Because that's a great question. The real question has been going around is Bitcoin a bubble? And a lot of the different people have different interpretations of what a bubble is. One way of a bubble is, well, if your your newspaper boy start giving you stock tips, then it's a bubble, right?
Right.
That's the one some people are saying. But my interpretation of bubble is this: when you have a price that explodes beyond the norm, and where there are few sellers, where everybody's a buyer, and there are few sellers, and you have no equilibrium in the market at all, no gaps to fill, nothing. It's just one complete buy, skyrocketing the price far beyond what its true value is. Because in relativity, you can't say that Bitcoin is really in relation to currencies. Because if you look at the charts, there are days when the dollar goes down and Bitcoin goes down.
Yeah.
And there are days when the dollar goes up and Bitcoin goes up. So it's not in an opposing correlation to the dollar, even though it's valued in dollars. If it's going to be considered a currency, it needs to move in opposition to the currency it's valued in, correct?
Yeah.
The dollar goes against the yen, the dollar goes against the euro, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If Bitcoin was a currency in relation to sovereign currencies, then it should be moving in opposition to the dollar, and it should be moving in opposition at a relative clip. So if the dollar goes down, say 0.4%, Bitcoin should go up 0.4% or modicum thing, right? But it's not. Bitcoin is going up at skyrocketing, and the volatility is so great, no matter what the dollar does, no matter what the yen does, the euro, etc. That means that it's being used as a security. It's a speculative investment, similar to the dot-coms of the day. Because what is its correlation to? Is its correlation to gold? Well, gold's been going up, and so is Bitcoin. So it can't be in correlation, opposition to gold. It's a separate entity that's being treated by a separate entity by those who are buying and selling. Bitcoin is mostly used by South Korea, Japan, and China, 70% of all transactions, as a medium of exchange of currency arbitrage. Mm-hmm. If capital controls say you can't take RMB out of China, then you take your RMB and you buy Bitcoin, and then you go buy dollars. So it's just simply a mechanism for currency arbitrage.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah.
Opposing?
No.
I'm wanting to do a debate. I'm not trying to dictate or mandate here.
No, not whatsoever. It's yeah, totally.
I'm looking at the fundamentals. I'm not trying to tell everybody it's going to the moon. Buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, one of the things we say is, look, I mean, crypto is still, because one of the things I think everybody has to do is be pragmatic and understand how to leverage certain things to their benefit. And I think the meteoric rise of Bitcoin is something that the average investor could buy. Case in point, myself, a lot of my partners, one of my close friends who are involved in cryptos. If you look at our wallets, if I were to outlay our complete crypto portfolio out there, very little of it is actually held in Bitcoin. We'll get the Bitcoin, but we're so leveraging out to like other different coins and using it as arbitrage between Bitcoin and Litecoin, Bitcoin and Ethereum, Bitcoin and Ripple, Bitcoin and Populous, Bitcoin and EOS. I mean, there's so that's what we're utilizing it for. A lot of people right now, there's not much sellers in Bitcoin. Correct. They're all holding it because they deem it's going to go higher. I think it is going to go higher. And you're right. There is only like 1% that controls the majority of the Bitcoin that's out there, and they can manipulate the price. Even with all these things, it's still a better alternative than the dollar. I don't know what the long-term outcome on Bitcoin is, and I tend to agree with some people. We might be, we're not even early adopters at this stage. We're at we're practically like mavericks, at this stage of the game with cryptocurrencies. And I think the whole thing is this, we could be looking at a MySpace in relation to a Facebook. We could be looking at something that could be gone in another 5 or 10 years or whatnot. But during that time, it's the smart thing to do is be pragmatic about it. And if you have the capabilities of leveraging it, because there's still hundreds of thousands of businesses that accept Bitcoin. There's still use and utility and fungibility there, especially with the newer Bitcoin forks. I mean, there could be multiple versions of Bitcoin. We have, Bitcoin Classic, we have Bitcoin Cash, we have another fork coming in for Bitcoin too. So these are all very good things that are happening. So yes, there's a lot of price manipulation. Yes, there is, 1% of the of wallets that are being held, but there's still a tremendous amount of development that is being done, and that development is being done not by financial institutions, but by those who are on the ground floor, working on the code itself, expanding it within these, private, communities, kind of like how Linux is expanding. So that's one of the things that we have to look at. I agree with you wholeheartedly. These things do exist, but I still think it's still a better alternative than fiat at this stage of the game.
Yeah, yes and no, but I will say one thing you said is the absolute key, and this is the hardest thing, because you know what, you've been working in Wall Street for decades. You said be pragmatic about it, yep. Which means that you hope for the best, but you're realist. You see things as they are. Totally. You don't see things as you want them to be. Take a look at
right. I'm not married to a viewpoint.
Take a look at the .com bubble. People were buying stocks who didn't understand even what a price-to-earnings ratio is, much less anything. Okay, the vast majority of people, even today, who invest don't do research. They don't do fundamentals. They give their money to a broker and they listen to their broker because they trust their broker.
Bingo.
Or a mutual fund or whatever. The vast majority of people will never really do the work and the research into it. And so you will have it very easy to, you have a combination of two things. One, people will just throw their money in looking at the price. Price goes up, I feel good. But I have no idea what this does. Second thing is you have a bunch of people who are scared to death. Okay, they're the Luddites. Think about this. How long did it take people even to have a personal computer after they started coming out in the early 80s? How many people still use a flip phone versus a smartphone, or these type of things? Or I got a better idea. Remember when direct deposit first came out? How many people still didn't trust the banking system, but wanted their physical paychecks, and then they take it to the bank. It took almost being forced when the government's going to say, we're no longer printing out paper checks, you're going to have direct deposit. It forced them to do it. Well, that's the type of thing I see with people, because if you think about it, if the Bitcoin price in relation to dollars goes up to, say, 100,000, okay, and what many Bitcoin evangelists are saying is this is going to replace the dollar and become the global financial system.
No, it never will.
Okay, for sake of the argument, let's say it does. Okay, so you get your paycheck. Your paycheck, say, is a modicum $2,000 every 2 weeks, so $4,000 a month. If one Bitcoin is $100,000, that means you're going to look at your paycheck in your Bitcoin wallet, and you have 0.000025 of a Bitcoin. You have 1/10,000th of a Bitcoin. How many people are going to look at their paychecks and be able to consciously relate that to money? You don't even have one of something. You have 1/10,000th of something.
Right.
Okay. Secondly, how much is it going to cost retailers to readapt their entire point of sale system to do not just one cryptocurrency, but hundreds of cryptocurrencies?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if somehow there can,
and not just the PO,
you want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be an entrepreneur. You create the point of sale system for retail that runs on the blockchain, and you will be Zuckerberg. You will be the next billionaire. Okay, because stores like Target and whatever, guess what? They don't really accept Bitcoin.
Right.
They accept third-party conduits who do the conversions for them into dollars. So when you start seeing things priced in your store in Bitcoin value, then the game is on. They accept Bitcoin. No, but for now, what they do is they accept third-party conduits that allow the conversion between Bitcoin and dollars. The other problem with Bitcoin is the volatility. You could, if you had bought some Bitcoin yesterday and you wanted to go to, say, a Starbucks and buy some coffee, and after China came out with their news, the Bitcoin price dropped $700 in one fell swoop, or 8%, $400. And all of a sudden, you don't have as much as you did just last night. Until the volatility stops, it will never, ever be accepted as money. That stability has to stay in there. So there's a lot of things going along the lines. And finally, my biggest fear is that governments do not give up power easy. And if they know that their own sovereign currencies are on the way out, they are very easily going to crack down on these cryptocurrencies, especially if, like we see with the BRICS, like we see with Russia, like we see eventually possibly with China, once the sovereigns decide that they want their own currency, then they're going to bring the full power, like they did with Liberty Coin, on any threat to their system. So you can still use Bitcoin for transactions, but it's going to be pure black market. And the problem is
it's kind of like what's happening right now in like Venezuela.
You're not going to get the critical mass of people who are going to easily be kowtowed by the government, and they're going to fall in line with the sovereign policies on this.
Yes, they will be.
These are my biggest fears on this, judging by the history of governments, money, and people. Now, if the whole system crashed, now what I would love to see, to tell the truth, this is what I'd love to see, and it would actually be a boon for economies around the world, is let the Fed and the banks create their own settlement coin for their own interbank transactions, and let market create its own domestic currency for trading that's done domestically, not internationally, but domestically. And people could use that as money.
Right.
That would be the ultimate in both spheres. Separate government control over the general economy and the use of cryptocurrencies, but then let the government do what it wants in interbank settlement as it sees fit. The other side of the coin is it's going to be really, really difficult for Bitcoin to function as a replacement for money, because how's it going to deal with lending?
Mm-hmm.
Because how many banks are going to have a large enough amount of Bitcoin to be able to facilitate billions of dollars in lending?
Yeah.
That to me is going to be the real kicker on it. But
one of the things that Satoshi wrote about, and one of the things that I like to emphasize, and I think I mentioned this before, is this. One of the things that Satoshi says, the answer for human freedom is not the cryptocurrency itself, but the blockchain. And that's what people need to focus on. Bitcoin in bank lending, I don't know. Would somebody develop some sort of a platform that could possibly allow that? Possibly, but you'd have to do another fork, and you'd have to call it something else. You'd have to call it Bitcoin Lend, Bitcoin Fund. I don't know, something like that. But you have, salt lending that's built on the blockchain using a tokenization rather than a crypto, using a tokenization where it's a platform for lending and for loans, utilizing tokens. So that's one aspect of it. So the blockchain is what we need to get excited about. In terms of Bitcoin,
bingo.
Will it get critical mass? I don't ever think it will get critical mass. Why? Because there are people that still don't even know how to properly use email. Okay, they barely know how to use email. They know how to write an email. They know how to send it, but in terms of adding attachments or changing a font, they're clueless. Okay, so I don't think it'll ever reach critical mass. And irrespective of what laws governments make, those who are already involved heavily in Bitcoin, in trading it, in utilizing it, it's not going to stop them one bit from ever stopping. They're not, because they're going to keep doing what they're going to do. The guy in Venezuela who's trying to get medication in from another country utilizing Bitcoin, he doesn't care what a crackdown on an exchange in the United States or in China does. He just has the ability to use it, and so that's
Right.
where it's going to be. I think it's going to still be fringe. I think it's going to be popular, but I think for global trade, it's going to be gold, man. It's going to be a gold trade settlement. I think it's on a global level. There's still going to be currencies, but it's going to be currencies that are going to be backed by something, backed by a commodity of some sort.
I'm 100% behind you, and I think the cryptocurrency in some form is here to stay. The blockchain is obviously going to be the future. I'm 100% behind that.
Yep.
I believe that China and the BRICS are proving that gold is, like I said, it's both a physical and probably in many different instances. Think about it. You don't even have to look at the Christian Bible for what God says on gold and silver. Look at what probably one of the most religious, the two biggest religions of the world, Hinduism, which gold is everything, and Sharia finance law, which now is gold backed. Okay, these things don't pop out of thin air. This is why, if you want to get in the Middle East,
look at 1 gram. Abu Dhabi, the UAE, they're backing the whole entire thing with Sharia gold and 1 gram and their whole entire gold backed crypto.
Right. And so this is, if you can have cryptocurrencies, there's always going to be a representation, because if you think about it, we didn't, when we created the dollar, even under the gold standard before the Federal Reserve, late 1800s, early 1900s, people didn't walk around with sacks of gold. During the time of the Renaissance, when you had the bankers, the Venetian bankers, they had these things called letters of credit, because you didn't walk around with 100 ounces of gold, a big sack of gold, wherever you went to transact. You would go to these local banks, you would have your money stored there, or your gold stored there. They give you a letter of credit, and it would be just like what we use for exporting and importing and trading today. Same thing with the cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency and the tokens are going to be representative of those letters of credit, where you have on deposit your wealth, your money, your reserves. Only it's going to be gold backed in some capacity.
Exactly correct, man.
So if they can meld gold, cryptocurrencies, and the blockchain, where everything is transparent, guess what? You would have probably the best secure financial system that you've had in the past several hundred years.
Yeah.
If not more.
Correct. Absolutely correct, man. And the best thing is, man, at the end of the day, you're talking about the emergence of the multipolar world. That multipolar world is here. It's here to stay, and there's nothing that can stop, and we all benefit from that. If we could all, if we could be partakers in it and be creative, we could all benefit from that as well. So
Yeah, and there's somebody in the chat room who mentioned LA token. You've heard of the LA token, right?
LA token?
LA token. That's the token where they want to put every single asset on the planet, tokenize it. $5 to $15 trillion worth of assets. Everything is tokenized, and what they do then is that you can actually invest in or buy in somebody else's property.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to put
real estate, it's like a real estate trust.
Not only that, if you had a Picasso painting,
yes.
if you choose that you needed some money, you could put that painting out on this LA token platform.
Bingo.
And you could go ahead and people would buy into it. They would buy, invest in it. That's where you get your capital.
It's brilliant.
And then, of course, when you pay it off, but you would keep the painting, but people would have ownership into it. And if you ended up selling the painting later, you would have to dole out proportion of the sales to those who have the tokens, that type of thing. That's what LA token wants to do, is tokenize every asset on the planet.
Yeah, and it's probably backed by a smart contract. Where if something is sold, the smart contract activates and doles out all the funds.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the wild, wild west.
It's exciting, Ken. It definitely is exciting.
It reminds me of the New World when Spain came over, and Spain and Portugal had that writ from the Vatican where they controlled the entire North America, South America, Caribbean. And then the Brits and the Dutch were like, hey, wait a second. And they had Queen Anne's War in the late 1600s. And then they separated them off. Guess what? Everything was based on a silver standard, but it was the Wild West. And we had from 1500 to 1783, the height of the Industrial Revolution was the greatest time of prosperity in the history of the world, based on a silver standard.
There you go. There you go. I agree with you wholeheartedly, man. Very good observation. Ken, thank you for joining us, man. Thanks for coming on board, bro. It's always informative, always exciting to have you on, and it's always educational as well, man. We appreciate all that. Folks, again, check out Ken, thedailyeconomist.com, and also his writings on roguemoney.net. Check out his channel. Subscribe to The Daily Economist on YouTube. You get daily updates as well as complete total breakdowns of everything. Ken is a real mind, someone who I respect very highly, so guys, check him out. With that being said, folks, we're over and out. Take it away, CJ.